What's up, Sixers fans? This is the Sixers Talk podcast presented to you by Wilmington University. Wilm U Works. I'm joined by the one, the only, the great, Noah Levick. Noah, how you doing today?
Doing all right, Ben. Yeah, excited to talk some Sixers, and yet again we've got some interesting news, and Joel Embiid earning himself a lot of money to discuss.
Joel Embiid has a lot of money that'll make me jealous. We saw the last of the Sixers summer league games. We got the first bit of taste of the NBA schedule, so a lot of exciting news before we get into it. Yo, listeners, give us 5 stars, rate, review. Give us 5 stars. If you give us anything less, I just assume that it's you hate me or Danny because Noah's the greatest thing possible. Let's start off with Joel Embiid, the supermax contract. That's a lot of money for the Sixers. Star player, well deserved. What was your thoughts from the supermax Joel Embiid signed yesterday?
Yeah, I think we touched on it in one podcast earlier this offseason, and my opinion on it was it just wasn't something where it was worth getting cute and including, intricate injury provisions or what have you. If fully guaranteed contract was what it took, that's what the Sixers needed to give him. So I think it was pretty much expected. It was just a question of when exactly he would sign this deal and if it would indeed be fully guaranteed. And look, it would have been justified to have it not be fully guaranteed given his injury history, which is quite extensive. And he's a big guy, 7-footer, who has struggled to stay healthy. But look, this is an MVP runner-up. And just this is kind of what you have to pay players nowadays in the NBA in order to keep them on your team. So, as you said, he's very much deserving of this contract. There is the possibility that it's something the Sixers heavily regret, but I really think ultimately a no-brainer, and cool to see that Joel Embiid finds it important to be loyal to this city. He wants to stay here his whole career, and he has a real chance, if everything goes according to his master plan here, to be an all-time great Sixer, and the hope is that he leads them to their first title in quite a long time. Big news, but not shocking news by any means. But nevertheless, nice for the Sixers to have a great player locked in through 2027.
No, it's a great deal for the Sixers. I like that there's no injury provisions and things like that. I understood it on the last contract, but I think he earned just a legit contract moving forward. His current deal still has 2 years left on it, so the supermax will start at age 29 and run through his age 33. I thought there would be some risk that he would wait another year to sign it, bet on himself to get even more money, or just wait it out. The tweet earlier this offseason, what are we doing when Ben Simmons hasn't been traded and after the DeAndre Drummond signing? I just thought there was a reason for pause. I always think there's a legit reason that a player will not return. And not saying I know Joel Embiid's people, not saying I talk to him or anything like that. I just never guarantee it as a foregone conclusion that a player will re-up, especially for the third contract. So I'm happy he's staying here for the next 6 years.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think at the same time, though, Joel Embiid has formed pretty deep bonds with the Sixers organization and the fan base, and it's very important to him, I think, to stay here long term. And this is someone who has a keen sense for drama. He talks a lot about how his life is like a movie. So I think it is important to him to sort of craft a particular kind of story. And we just saw with Giannis Antetokounmpo how satisfying it is when you stick with the team when there is the option as a very talented player to move elsewhere and you're ultimately rewarded for going through some bleak times. And Joel Embiid certainly experienced that. Didn't play his first 2 seasons due to injuries, was sitting on the bench for a 10-win basketball team, has cycled through hundreds of teammates, and he's kind of the last man standing now. I think it's been clear for a long time that the entire team revolves around him, and this obviously cements it. So, in my view, sure, there's a big burden on him, just given the money that he'll be paid and that he's the face of the franchise, and the expectation certainly will be that he will carry them in clutch moments in the playoffs and all that. But there's also a lot of pressure on the organization and on Daryl Morey to nail this Ben Simmons situation, however it plays out, and to surround Embiid with the best team possible. So those are still open questions that we're all waiting on, but good for the Sixers that they have this Embiid situation resolved, if you will, and just great news that he's locked in, no question.
Yeah, there will be a lot of weight on Embiid's shoulders, a burden. But what you said after that, it being on the Sixers and the organization, I think if Embiid doesn't win a championship here, unless his play dramatically falls off, I don't think anyone will place blame on him. I think people will look at the organization for not putting the right pieces and players around him. So for the Sixers, the biggest thing this offseason, arguably, getting on Embiid to sign the supermax. Next, we're not going to get too much into it unless you want to. It's just figure out what they'll do with the Ben Simmons saga moving forward. But signing Embiid, get him to the supermax, I think that was the most important thing this offseason, and it's done.
Yeah, arguable. The Ben Simmons situation certainly has loomed large in many discussions about the Sixers. But yeah, no doubt this was a big deal to get it done. With Simmons, as we've talked about a lot, it's not obligatory for the Sixers to trade him if doing so would not be prudent. So that remains the case. He remains a Sixer, and we wait to see exactly how this all plays out. Training camp creeps closer and closer. We're at the point now where the full NBA schedule is expected to be released at the end of this week. So we're hitting a lot of those landmarks of, okay, the season is coming up and Ben Simmons is still on the team. So for now, the drama continues.
Noah, Summer League for the Sixers has come and gone. It was fun while it lasted. A little bit of basketball, although not NBA regular season games. It was fun to watch while we had it. I had some takeaways from Summer League. Before we get into mine, what were some of your takeaways?
Yeah, I think Tyrese Maxey was so good. Only played 2 games, didn't really need to play anymore. Headed back home to Garland, Texas to host a youth basketball camp, which, is a cool thing for him to do. Already, he's a young person himself at 20 years old, but kind of giving back to his community there. Nice to see. And yeah, in his 2 games, really, if you want to nitpick, I guess the only negative is in the second game. He was 1 for 8 from 3, but otherwise he looked tremendous, running the show for the Sixers offensively. The willingness to shoot threes is great, and he was pretty much getting wherever he wanted on the floor and extremely impressive in his 2 games. And then for me, the other big takeaway is Paul Reed continues to provide evidence that he can push for NBA playing time, I think, as soon as this season, especially given that the Sixers, in terms of the backup center spot, they again really just have one conventional option at the moment. And Paul Reed can play both small ball 5 and then also at the 4, as he showed in Summer League. And you can't do much better than a 27-point, 20 rebound, 4 block, 4 steal, 4 assist game. Like, come on. I mean, this guy's everywhere on the floor. He always makes an impact and plays with energy and passion. I think for him, it's just a question sometimes of how do you maintain that intensity and chaotically good style of play while still being in control. He talked about how one of his big takeaways is the need to stay composed, and just avoiding, bad mistakes, because I'm sure we can all imagine a situation and saw situations where he messes up a coverage or he tries to do too much with the ball in the backcourt and turns it over, and that leads to Doc Rivers, yanking him from a game. So I think Paul Reed will be fascinating to watch this season, and I would not at all be surprised at this point if he is playing NBA rotation minutes for the Sixers. So I think those were my two primary takeaways. And then also notable, unfortunately, that Isaiah Joe got hurt in the Sixers last game, mild left MCL sprain. So at least good news that, on paper, that's not something that's going to keep him out of training camp or anything along those lines. But he played pretty well, did well handling the ball. We all know that he can shoot it, can defend, pretty well as a smaller wing. So Isaiah Joe was good, but, a bit of a setback for him there with the injury. And then I guess also worth noting that Jaden Springer, to me, he was about what we all expected. I don't know how you saw Springer's performance, but got more comfortable as he went along. He's an 18-year-old kid. Didn't shoot the ball especially well. He was 13% from three, like 38% from the floor. And I think the adjustment to NBA three-point range was a little bit of a struggle and might take some time. But we all saw that he's a strong defender who, moves his feet well, is physically strong, especially for his age, and has some good tools to work with. But it's probably going to take some time for him to develop into a regular NBA player in all likelihood.
Ooh. Let's start off with Paul Reed. I think after what we saw in Summer League, he deserves some minutes. I'm not saying 25 minutes a game, but I think he deserves some regular run in NBA games, averaging 17 and 12 through the Summer League games and that monster game that you mentioned earlier. I think he's ready to show what he's capable of, and he's earned it, in my opinion. I don't think he needs to spend another season in the G League or any type of anything in development. I think he earned his shot to play in the NBA regular season schedule, multiple games a week. Then Tyrese Maxey, I saw what I needed from him last year. He played big in that first Summer League game. The 1 for 8 night from beyond the arc was upsetting, but we knew coming into Summer League he wasn't a strong 3-point shooter. That's where we wanted to see him grow. But I think he earned his right to be a regular player in the rotation of the NBA roster, specifically the Sixers. I think he's up for – it would be a big drop-off if the Sixers move on from Ben Simmons and Maxey is the starting point guard. But I think there's a lot of upside there, a very bright future for him. And I'm okay watching that bright future happen here in Philadelphia. Isaiah Joe, he has juice. The kid can play. Difference between juice and sauce. Juice is temporary. Sauce lasts a lot longer. Some slang for those that don't follow. I would like to see what he can do just going forward. I'm not saying he deserves as many minutes, definitely as Maxey or even as Paul Reed, but I think he deserves to show what he can do. I think he's grown, and he's grown on me, so I'm excited to see what he can do. Springer, I don't want to say disappointing. He's 18 years old. We knew what we would get when the Sixers drafted him. I think he has a lot of room for improvement. I would not want to throw him to the Wolves. So if just to leave him in the G League, allow him to develop and grow, I think that's the best move for the Sixers going forward. Those are my takeaways from Summer League.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see exactly how they handle Springer this first year. I think that's probably a good call that him receiving playing time would be beneficial. And to me, I did see him get a little better, a little more comfortable, a little more sure of himself with the ball in his hands throughout Summer League. And to me, that's an indication that he's someone who just improves with reps, which would support the idea of him playing in the G League. I will say with Springer, I felt a little better about like, okay, I wasn't being too harsh in noting that his shot isn't great mechanically, despite the fact that he shot over 40% from three in college, albeit on a low volume, and was over 80% from the foul line. Like, it's a bit of a stiff shot, and I think it was reasonable to expect that there would be some decline once he tried to extend it to NBA 3-point range, and that was indeed the case. And I think for him, he would like to see, regardless of the results, that he just continues shooting when open. I think we saw at times defenders would go under screens, and because he wasn't shooting the ball well, he was perhaps a little reluctant to let it fly. Like we saw yesterday, he airballed a three, and then I don't think took one for the rest of the game. So regardless of whether he's making them, you do want him shooting the three and just continue growing that area of his game. But the college numbers at least tell you he's not a lost cause as a shooter. He's got some good touch. He can knock down mid-range shots. It's just a question of if they see him as a 3-and-D prospect, can he become an above-average three-point shooter? And I think we see he's not there yet, and that's something that's going to take some time. But as far as the Sixers second-year guys, I mean, in my opinion, they were all pretty excellent, and that 2020 draft class looks quite strong at the moment when you're talking about a late first-round pick and 2 second-round picks potentially having chance to be NBA contributors in year 2. So good signs, across the board there. Rajon Tucker, to me, was basically exactly what we expected. He's a sensational athlete who kind of plays like a football player, like a fullback or a safety or something, just loves contact. And his jump shot is inconsistent. And for him to become an NBA player would sure help his case if he wasn't wildly missing jump shots, rather frequently. But plays with a lot of intensity. His teammates love him. And you can see why the Sixers gave him a 2-way contract again. He's a great athlete who's been really productive at the G League level. And then Aaron Henry showed a little bit of his stuff yesterday, chipped in 17 points, showed some variety with the scoring. He was kind of a do-everything sort of player at Michigan State. So I'll be intrigued to watch him, and I imagine he'll be mostly playing for the Bluecoats on his 2-way contract with the Sixers.
Before we wrap up this segment, question back towards the bigger takeaways, primarily Isaiah Joe and Paul Reed. If I forced you to place a bet down on who would be a bigger contributor for the Sixers moving forward, who would you say it would be?
For this year, I would say Paul Reed. I think front court depth was a glaring weakness for the Sixers, certainly by the end of the Hawks series. They tried to address it in free agency through adding George Niang and Andre Drummond, but there are still minutes to take there, in my estimation. And Paul Reed is the kind of guy who just grabs things by the scruff of the neck, like he just attacks. And you heard Brian Adams, the Sixers summer league coach and an assistant on the NBA staff, say multiple times throughout summer league, no one works harder than Paul Reed. Like, this guy just has an insatiable work ethic, and everyone who comes across him seems to love him and seems to want him to do well and seems to think he has a future in the NBA. So I think he's just trending in a great direction, and he can give the Sixers perhaps a little bit of what they lack in terms of a surge of energy and rebounding and a variety of skills in this unique, chaotic package off the bench. One of the important areas for him will be the outside shooting. Everyone, of course, loves the idea of like a stretch 4, stretch 5. He did shoot over 40% from 3 in the G League. Apparently, he's been working a ton on his jumper this offseason as well. So if that were to carry over, that makes the case for him getting NBA minutes this season even stronger. But yeah, I would place my bet there on Paul Reed if I have to. Not that I'm low on Isaiah Joe, but I just think Paul Reed's stock keeps rising and rising.
I would agree. Okay, coming up next, Christmas is somewhat canceled for the Sixers, but NBA season is right here. Tell you more when we come back. NBA season starting soon. We got the first taste of the NBA schedule, Noah. Christmas Day, no Sixers. We won't see a game Christmas Day. Good or bad, depending how you look at it. I like having the day off, so I'm not going to complain. However, the first week of the season, Sixers have a primetime game Friday, October 22nd against the Brooklyn Nets. Big deal, or am I just excited that we're getting closer to the season?
I think any game against the Nets at this point is somewhat of a big deal. You know, all the matchups were rather hyped last season, and it was unfortunate that pretty much every game was heavily impacted by injuries or COVID-related absences or what have you. But you know, the two games that the Sixers did win against the Nets, they felt, I think, a little more special than the typical regular season game. So I'm sure that that will be an exciting one. I'm sure the fans will be hyped up for that. And I think the Nets more and more, probably across the league, are building a little bit of that villainous super team reputation. And as things stand, they are the current strong betting favorite wherever you look for the NBA title, given they brought back the core of last year's team and on paper made some decent offseason additions. Patty Mills probably being the most notable one in free agency. Cameron Thomas, the late first-round draft pick, looked very good in summer league. So that's a great team, and it would be a good early season win for the Sixers if they could win that one at Wells Fargo Center. But yeah, no Christmas game. I'm sure some in the fan base take that as a sign of disrespect or that the league is looking down upon the Sixers in some way. But every team is 82 games, and the ultimate question is how many of them you win. The question of whether you play on Christmas in the big picture, not that consequential. So the Sixers will be able to sit back and relax and enjoy Christmas with their families this year.
Yeah, some people took it as a slight. To me, it was just, I mean, someone has to play, and there's going to be a bunch of teams that don't play. It's not that big of a deal to me. I would say up until recently, the past 4 years, it had been a long time since the Sixers had played on Christmas Day. I can't even remember the last time before Embiid was drafted. So it's not that big of a deal to me. I can relax, casually watch the other games, and just enjoy the day with family or whatever I end up doing. Maybe I just order pizza, stay away from my family. They crazy. But no, I'm happy that we're closer in the schedule and the opening week. These primetime games, Christmas Day games, just mean we're closer to NBA season coming back. So I'm excited about it. If you're upset that the Sixers aren't playing on Christmas Day, this is going to sound harsh. Tell them to play better and don't go out in epic fashion, because I think the only big matchups the league would have put them against was maybe the Hawks, because Trae Young has become a villain, even though he's a villain my size. He's a villain I enjoy watching because he embraces it. And maybe the Boston Celtics, even though just after how last season went and it being so one-sided, I don't think they would want to do that. So I just didn't see much storylines for the Sixers to have a Christmas Day game.
Yeah, I was on the same page. I was expecting there to be a Sixers-Hawks game either opening week or Christmas. So I was slightly surprised that the league didn't take advantage of that, but I'm sure there will be some good regular season matchups regardless between the teams. And then the Celtics matchups this year will be, I guess, fun depending on how you look at it, given the Al Horford, angle yet again. And, Sixers Celtics games are always good. But yeah, I mean, don't mean to downplay the notion that Christmas games are, important and something that players and fans get hyped up for. Like we spoke about Juice earlier. I remember the 2019 game covering that, and that building, was rocking. And the Sixers put together, I think, probably their best performance of the regular season with that 2019-20 team, just crushing the Bucks, at least in the first half. And then Milwaukee made a bit of a comeback in the second half. And then I think Furkan Korkmaz hit like 4 straight threes. So they played an awesome game the last time they were in action on Christmas. But ultimately, not a big deal. And we will look forward to the full schedule coming out, which I believe it is supposed to on Friday. And then we'll have a lot more to break down.
Oh, exciting. I think the Sixers didn't get matched up with the Hawks on Christmas Day because it's Madison Square Garden. And no matter how good or bad the Knicks are, it seems like they're playing on Christmas, even the years when Melo was there but was injured. And maybe the Sixers might see the Hawks in the first week of the season. Just might not be a primetime game, but that seems like a chance to miss out on money. So who knows? But yes, as Noah said, the rest of the schedule will be released later this week. Friday is what everyone's hoping for. Noah, before we get out of here, do you have anything you're working on over at NBCSportsPhilly.com?
So coverage of a lot of the stuff we talked about here yesterday, the Joel Embiid supermax, observations on the final Summer League game, and then moving forward, we'll have a couple of post-Summer League stories, a bit more insight into Paul Reed and where he stands, and Tyrese Maxey as well. And then, of course, when the schedule comes out, we will be breaking that down.
That is the one, the only, the great one, Noah Levick. Follow him on Twitter at Noah Levick. If you want to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, I usually just laugh at stuff, but it's at I am Ben Berry. This was the Sixers Talk podcast presented to you by Wilmington University. William U Works. We'll catch you next time.